Good evening, I'm Shamasa Rahman and you're watching Analyze. The topic for today's show is the fact that religious harmony is absolutely imperative for Pakistan. We saw the 9th and 10th of Muharram go by quite peacefully, I have to say, all over Pakistan, and then all of a sudden we see a flare-up of an incident in Rawalpindi. What are the facts behind it? How can it be prevented from happening again? How can it be contained? These are all questions that I would like answered. But I think before I start with the show, I'd like to give you an example of Gilgit. I was there recently and I had the opportunity to interview the key members of something called the Masajid Committee Board. This was a board that was set up about a year ago, and in this board, each side, the Shia side and the Sunni side, were asked to basically put forth 5 influentials, not religious scholars, from each of their community. And then these 10 people would come together, sit down, and actually they came up with the proper consensus, a point-by-point agreement on which they sat down and decided how religious harmony could be promoted so that killings on either side wouldn't happen. Once they put this document together, then it was a responsibility of each of that influential person to make sure that if anybody from either community, whichever community they were in charge of, said anything that would incite any sort of hatred whatsoever, that they would actually be spoken to kindly, gently, and convinced not to do so. This actual model, the Masajid Committee model, turned out to be so successful that at least I can quote you the official statistics that in the last year, we had about 50 killings in Gilgit. This year, as of until last month, the figure was down to 5. I'm not saying that even one life doesn't matter, but clearly this idea of getting the community involved to influence made a big difference, and I think that is something that can be applied right now as well. Whether it is the local influentials within Pindi, whether it is at provincial level, whether it is at a national level. I think that if people from either communities, stakeholders, politicians, religious scholars, if they were all to come on board and say we want religious harmony, then I think that this should stop, and we could actually move forward towards a more peaceful Pakistan. Joining me today, General retired Talat Masud Sahab. You have seen him on this show before. Normally, I always introduce him as a defense analyst, which he is, but I think that as far as this particular topic is concerned, he would actually be quite an appropriate person to address this as well. Assalamu alaikum ji. Thank you very much. We are joined by Shaukat Paracha Sahab. He is an anchor and an analyst, and he conducts his own show, as you've seen, and you've also seen him on this program before, and I always say he's a very balanced guest to have on the show. Assalamu alaikum ji. Thank you very much. We are joined by Dr. Naeem Mushtaq Sahab. He is a religious scholar to the extent that he believes and he promotes interfaith and religious harmony. You've seen him on a show that we did on the 10th of Muharram, discussing the significance of Muharram, and in light of that show, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking out the time. General Sahab, I'd like to start with you. This one example that I quoted of the Masajid Committee, because I had a chance to meet each of the key members of this committee. It's nothing that the government actually did. It is the community leaders themselves who came on board, and then they put together 5 people from each side who they thought were the right people to choose. And through them and through their influence, they were actually able to bring down the figures drastically. Why can't we do something similar all over the rest of Pakistan?
Well, I think you have a very important point that the civil societies can play a very major role in trying to bring harmony within various sects and so on. There's no doubt about it. But there is much, the problem is very deep and is deep-rooted. There are also historical legacies, and there are also power plays within Pakistan and in the region between the powerful Shia groups and the countries which are supporting the various groups, whether it is the Saudis or the Iranians and so on. There is also a power play of that sort. Plus, there is deep internal fault lines in Pakistan, which are also responsible for what's happening as far as these sectarian conflicts are concerned. So it also, whereas I would fully agree with you that at the tactical level and at the immediate administrative level, what you are saying would be extremely helpful. But I think we need to take a lot more look at it in a much more long-term basis, and also try to analyze as to exactly why is it that sectarian fault lines have developed and this lack of tolerance has developed within our society. I think to that extent I would say that the way that we have gone about our educational system, the way that the government has promoted certain militant groups in the past in order to promote its foreign policy goals, and there are many other factors that are responsible. I could list them, so many of them. I think we need to address all of these, we just cannot ignore any of these.
For instance, you're absolutely right, but as you mentioned, a very key point, you mentioned international forces. You said whether it is Iran on one side or Saudi Arabia. I asked the same people these questions in the Masajid committee, and they agreed. They said, yes, there are external influences, but they said once we have a grip on our local community, it becomes harder for anybody to harbor or to be facilitated from external factors. So it does help even in that way.
Yeah, that is true. But, let's put it this way. If you are being educated in such a way that, your syllabus tells you or your madrasa tells you that the other sect is terrible and it needs to be eliminated or, to be attacked or assaulted or is unacceptable, and should not be tolerated, obviously your mind would be conditioned, and especially if you are a person who is vulnerable to that sort of, at a younger age, you're all vulnerable to this sort of stimuli. So I think we have to understand that education plays a very important part. Then to what extent this factor is being exploited within the society, we have to see. And then what is being taught at the mosques. What sort of sermons are being given at the mosques. What sort of so I think each one of these aspects cannot just be ignored. Okay. And is our society at the moment a tolerant society? I think it's an extremely intolerant society that we have built. And then, as I said, that's a very important factor, is that how have we used in the past these militant groups which have also turned sectarian. So I think that's like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, for instance, is a classic example of how it has turned totally into a militant organization which is directing its force with the sometimes support of Al-Qaeda, against the Shias. And vice versa, the Shias have also been, supporting certain, of course, their militant groups supporting
you mentioned education being very important. Shaukat Sahab, I'd like to come to you. Education and the kind of education, religious education that is given to children at a young age can be extremely influential in terms of conditioning them. But at least, because I've been studying Gilgit-Baltistan very carefully, according to the data that I saw, if we're talking about the educational syllabus, up until the 80s, up until the mid-80s, it was a place which was fairly in harmony. You had intermarriages, and then all of a sudden it sort of, sort of went up in flames. And then when you talk about the mosque, another interesting point that all these religious influentials who set up this committee, they said that in this memorandum that they put together, they clearly said that no religious place of worship, no imam barga, no mosque, none of these will be used. Their loudspeakers will not be used to spew any hatred. They put a complete stop on that. We can also do the same. I'm just saying.
In fact, when you talk about the 80s, when this whole mushroom was flourished in this country, that was for certain goals, and the goal was that a fight was going on against Soviet Union in Afghanistan. That was one of the instruments of policy that these people, they were groomed and who took part in jihad against Afghanistan, against Soviet Union in Afghanistan. But 90s and later on, in fact, we wasted time. That if one thing was invented for a certain goal, that goal was achieved. So the policy should have been changed, or
we should have brought these people back into the mainstream.
Obviously, nobody thought about that. So when General Saab says historical legacy is there, he is very right. He is very right in all senses. When you talk about non-use of loudspeakers and other things, that could have been the ideal, but it has not been.
Why, Shaukat Saab?
General Musharraf tried to register these madaris. The madaris, they resisted because they thought it's the interference into their own system. These madaris, they issue degrees which are valid in the election commission. So they are part of the system. So if schools are registered, why not these madaris? That was the argument put by General Pervez Musharraf. We have failed and failed very miserably to regulate by themselves. If they agree to regulate them, that should have been done. It has not been done. But for the foundation of the country, for the future of this country, for the peace of this country and the region, it is very important that this wave of extremism, I do not say terrorism alone, wave of extremism or the mushroom of extremism should be tackled once for all.
Okay, but something as simple as telling each religious place, just telling them, look, here is a list of do's and don'ts. You will not talk about any other religious community, sect, Muslim or otherwise, in any negative or any manner.
By saying or
and
telling.
And if you do, we will shut this down.
Just by saying or telling is not going to help, I tell you. As we groomed this industry rather, we have to do the same way, we have to follow the same path, and that started with little kids, little children in early 80s, and this pyramid was
why
erected.
Can't there be a legal order, a legal notice passed saying you will not use your loudspeaker to promote hatred, and this is
will not work, I tell you, because these forces are so strong that they will.
The state is so weak, and this
they are so strong that
it would be a start, don't you think,
this simple act of legislation and order will not work. You have to work with them, you have to take them along with you and have a solution by sitting or asking them to be there across the table. A simple act of parliament, a simple act of legislation and imposition of any law, I assure you, is not going to solve the issue, because they have to be taken on the board. They are so strong, I tell you, they are so strong, and we were happy that this Muharram was going peacefully without any major incident of terrorism, that was partly because of this shutting off mobile phones and partly because the government was in touch with all the religious scholars. But suddenly something erupted, and erupted in Rawalpindi. Look at the sensitivity of the city, you see. This city never had such riots in say 50 or 100 years, Every year I have been here in this city, we have been watching that this procession or such procession, they pass along peacefully. And what happened yesterday, that suddenly it erupted and erupted like anything, that it is now spreading to other smaller or major cities of Pakistan, So, administrative thing is one aspect. The other is that you reform the curricula, you manage to have their confidence. The first thing is that any time some government wants to regulate, they say we do not trust you, and their suspicions could be genuine, but they have to be part of the solution. I mean to say, as an executive person here, I mean, for example, you become an executive, you cannot pass an order which will not be implemented, I tell you. They need to be part of the solution, and that needs a grand consultation, whatever the the government can frame a module, but they have to be part of the solution.
Okay, Dr. Sahab, I'd like to come to you, but why not a pyramid solution where, like you said, I know you said education, absolutely important. We need to do that. Aside from that, taking on the the religious scholars, aside from that, the community leadership, and then at the government level, then to pass this legislation, then to make sure that we enforce it. At least if we start, it's a possibility, but we don't even seem to be starting as of yet.
Yes, that's right.
Why is that so?
See, I teach interfaith dialogue. I've been teaching it for the last 20 years, and I also teach leadership and management. My analysis is a bit different. I mean, I agree with their analysis totally, but my analysis, what I believe, that these sectarian groups, they have secret sympathy for the Talibanization in Pakistan. So the sectarian violence in Pakistan is the outcome of that Talibanization of the society.
That's what I think General Saab had mentioned. Exactly. He had mentioned this to begin with.
So what I believe, to stop sectarian violence, the political will needs to be strong of the government. For as far as the Talibanization is concerned,
so you are saying it's a link, it's a chain.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm from a Sunni background. I have a lot of Shia friends. I read Nahjul Balagha. I have delivered lectures on Nahjul Balagha. I don't see that sectarian violence between the groups. This sometimes this sectarian violence, the word we use, sectarian violence, sometimes the background is political. Sometimes the secret sympathy with the Taliban groups and instructions from them, they create these.
So religious sympathies are used as a means to achieve political or power.
Exactly. You will see most of the banned groups or most of the groups that have a violent background history are now being supported by the government, or they are also very actively involved in the political process. So they need to have check and balance. Apart from check and balance on madrasas, these political parties who have they have changed their names now. As they mentioned Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, they have a new name now, and they are very actively involved in the political process and in the social process with the full support of the government. They need to have check and balances. And apart from that, people, to kill the Taliban ideology, you need to take certain actions against the Taliban. So the nation can come out of the confusion.
So certain actions against the Taliban that, when we do our operations and we take actions, I don't support drone strikes, we see a more negative reaction come out. We see our political will divided. Some say, this is a shaheed. Some say, no, it's not a shaheed. So there, I think Dr. Saab is right, where we don't have that unity in taking on the Taliban forces.
Well, the reason is that there is a lot of confusion as far as the nature of threats that Pakistan faces. I mean, there is of course a threat which is in terms of ideological threat, and there is also a physical threat, emanating from Al-Qaeda and many other groups in Pakistan, from the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan and the several militant groups that operate. So there is of course a very strong linkage between the two. And then there is also a linkage, as we earlier said, between the policies of the government in the past and also present policies. Previously, it was also the military which was mostly responsible, as has been said, and which was in a way correct as well. But now the political parties are also exactly supporting in a similar way certain militant groups in order to advance their political agenda.
Is it also because they're scared, General Saab?
No, what has happened?
Question of physical
well,
safety
that
also?
is another issue. I think we should also understand that in order to make political gains and to get support from a larger segment of society, they have even co-opted with many militant groups during the last election, as we have seen. Now, all that only strengthens their hands, and they become a part of the political process as well. Now, if they became a part of a positive political process, you would say yes, they are most welcome, they are being moderated, and so on. But that is not exactly the case. What is happening is that they have, in a way, politically infiltrated the parties. They have infiltrated the political parties, and by doing that, they are influencing them. And the state at the moment, as you are aware, for several years has become weak, and the institutions of the state are so weak that they cannot stand up to these militant groups in terms of either having, their intelligence is poor, their reaction towards these militant groups is also extremely weak. At the same time, whenever they commit any crimes, they are unable to sort of pursue them and bring them to a logical legal end. So there are several weaknesses in the state as well. You need to strengthen all those weaknesses at the state level. So you need to have a resolve, you need to have a certain policy, you need to have a certain vision of your country. Now, if you don't have a vision of your country as to exactly what you want, and you go, then what happens is, because of this lack of confusion and clarity in your mind as to what exactly you want Pakistan to be, you go and sort of then co-opt with these groups, not understanding that you are undermining the very vision that the founders of the country like Jinnah, envisaged for Pakistan. So it's a very complex problem, but it's a problem that surely can be dealt with, and dealt with in a very robust way, provided there is an understanding and a determination. Then people will follow you, because people in this country want peace, like every country of the world.
I think every
country,
human
and
being
they are
wants
hungry
peace.
for peace. In Pakistan, people are hungry for peace. Now, it's also very, and I fully agree with him, and I had also mentioned something similar, that you can't segregate and compartmentalize and say, we will talk to the Taliban, we will talk to the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, and you will expect that Pakistan will still be a very modern state and will also not isolate itself from the rest of the world. Still it will play a very major role. It will still command respect of the world. It will still be a stable country.
But the counter-argument to that, General Saab, is that they say that, well, if the Americans can speak to the Taliban and if they realize that fighting them has not,
You see, I think, the whole parallel. No, but I think we need to also understand, and I would like to clarify that,
yes,
although
please.
I may have done it and all of us may have done it 100 times. There is no parallel between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan is a democratic country with a constitution, and if anyone has any agenda or a political party wants to change the constitution of Pakistan or its policies, by all means it should fight elections and get into the system and then change. If the majority of the people of Pakistan want Talibanization, it should be through the ballot, not through the gun.
Exactly.
And this aspect must be rubbed into, Imran Khan and all others. Because what are they talking all the time? They are saying, well, if they could have an office, they should have. That means any group which has guns should have an office, and we should keep on elevating them and make them stakeholders. I think it's so absurd. It's not only absurd, it's dangerous. From my perspective, it's extremely dangerous.
But Imran Khan's party also did get voted into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so you see that, and the rhetoric was the same even pre-election.
The thing is that they may have got voted for several other reasons. The reasons are that they've been trying different parties and the parties have not produced, so they want to try another party, and they of course all want peace. We all want peace also. Who doesn't want peace?
No, but
can we have peace?
Like Imran
you see, there is a big difference between peace and capitulation.
Absolutely, but when you're talking about people like Imran Khan, I don't want to keep harping on and on about him. People did not only vote for him in certain areas, his rhetoric was the same, his stance that we must talk to the Taliban and let them have an office was same even before the election. I know people in many areas of Karachi defense, people who are very liberal, very secular, very modern, who went out and stood in lines to vote for him for hours on end.
No, I'm not denying his popularity. I think in many ways he's an excellent representative of a political party in terms of his integrity, in terms of many of his policies. No one has any objection to that. I mean, I'm a great supporter of many of his policies. This does not prevent me from saying what I don't think is the right policy.
I agree, but I'm saying people didn't seem to, sort of give that enough weight.
So, I mean, they are most welcome to hold their views, but I think you would also give me that license that I could hold my view.
If I didn't give you that license, I wouldn't have you as a guest on my show. It's for your opinion that you are here. Shaukat Saab, one thing that General Saab mentioned, and coming back to this, is that these extremist elements have now come into the political system through various ways. And if they have come in, if we try to mainstream them politically, the idea has always been all over the world that if you are able to assimilate people into the mainstream and they give up what they have been doing in the past, then it is a good thing. The same way, if people who have been educated a certain way to think in an extremist manner, if they are taught otherwise, as you said, then you have to take them on board. So I'm a little confused as to when we take them on board, we're not getting the results we desire. And they are certainly not changing. Yet if we don't take them on board, then we face an equally severe problem.
You see, it's very easy to say that, as Dr. Saab is saying, that action should be done against them. They are not only in the political parties, they are in every street, they are in every corner, they are in every sector, they are in every mahalla. So, would you launch a war against them? And against whom you will fight a war?
They are invisible.
They are invisible, you see. I mean, if now the martyrdom of the soldiers is being questioned, what will you do? As General Saab rightly pointed out, it's a very complex problem. It is a very complex problem, many dimensions it has. So, to me, there is no short-term solution, I tell you. You have to adopt a comprehensive policy. Policy should have different aspects. The most important aspect is how to de-radicalize them. and it's not that something cannot be done. Turkey has done it very successfully. They have run a program of de-radicalization. They done it. Other countries, you know, what was in Ireland, they have brought them back into the mainstream of the national polity. If political parties, they are having them or support of them, or they have their sympathy, certain political parties, they also have sympathy for them. It's vice versa. You see, I mean, last 10 years, when the two governments, the government led by General Pervez Musharraf and the government led by former President Zardari, they did not opt the option of dialogue. They were pursuing them with action. Would we were able to finish them or root them out? It was not the case. If the question of interfaith harmony is important, similarly the question of harmony within one religion, our religion, is very important. And there has been examples, like in late 90s there was an organization called Milli Yakjehti Council, and all ulama of all sects, they used to sit around and they used to talk about the issues which are inter-sectarian issues, and they were together. I remember late Shah Ahmad Noorani was the president of Milli Yakjehti Council, and there was peace in the country for 4 or 5 years till this council was there. But later on, when 9/11 took place and the policies in this region or the geopolitical scenario changed the whole spectrum, and this you know, this movement TTP and other groups, they came into being. So the important thing is that if political parties get their sympathy, they also give them the sympathy. The consensus has been, the instruments of consensus have been, like all political parties, you know, it is a platform, it was an instrument that you initiate the dialogue, you try to talk to them, and if talks do not work, then there are other options.
But the talks don't seem to be working so far. The backdoor diplomacy so far that has been happening.
I already submitted that by fighting more than 10 years, were we able to subdue them? No, that did not work. I mean, they are everywhere, I am telling you, they are everywhere in the streets.
So tell me through a dialogue, like again I am going to come back to Imran Khan, I am going to mention Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We have seen that since PTI's government came into power in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, we have seen the incidents increase. We haven't seen a decrease.
They lost their 2 MPAs, they lost their 1 minister. You see, I mean, that's the level.
This is a party that says we believe in dialogue.
That's the level of threat that we are facing. And for elevating, you know, the situation or ameliorating the situation, we need to think in a comprehensive manner. We've been following one policy, and that policy was, like General Musharraf used to say, that we will finish them up to the mountains or anywhere. You see, that did not work. Were this state able to crush them? I told you one example, that now unfortunately the martyrdom of the soldiers, that's being questioned. You see, this has been the state of affair in this country. As General Saab said, that there are many influences, external influences, internal influences. We have to speak to everyone, all the factors which are contributing to this problem, and that is through talking to them. You see, this country is of everyone, you know, whether they are fighting against the state or whether those who are carrying weapon, they say we want imposition of Sharia in this country. No, who is opposing? A Constitution of Pakistan already grants that no law will be passed in this country
which is not accordance with the Sharia,
which is contrary to the Sharia.
Exactly.
So we need to speak to them that this all is important, this all is part of our system, and that happened exactly in Swat. When the public sympathy they lost, the action was very successful. I mean, confusion, General Saab is saying there is confusion. Absolutely, he is right. There is confusion that this nation is divided. Someone says their cause is justified, whether it is on the name of Afghanistan, whether on the name of the foreign occupation in Afghanistan. But this country is not occupying Afghanistan. This country is suffering because of the occupation in Afghanistan. The message If message is clear, if message is sincere, if message is clear in its outcome, in its objective, the people will listen. So far, the people have not listened, those who are fighting against the state or state institutions, you see.
But as far as I think, Dr. Saab, you interact more with people as well. As far as public sympathy is concerned, public sympathy is with people who are actually being victimized through this. Public sympathy, I don't think, is with the Taliban. Public sympathy is saying enough. I personally think, I mean, I don't think you sympathize with somebody who's going to kill somebody. I don't think you do. I don't think you do. I think all of us are like, we've had enough.
You don't even have to ask this question.
No, I'm saying
excuse me,
public sympathy.
I know you are talking metaphorically.
Yes, excuse me. Right beside your PTV studio, Marriott was bombed.
Yes.
Poor security guards, they were killed. And you know what was the headline in one of the news media the other day? That since Americans were there, that's why it was attacked. The entire debate in this country was changed. I think you both could be the witness, you know. The entire debate in this country was changed, you see. That's what I say. These people whom you say that the people are with the victims, no, the people are also with them. I mean, look at what happened about Hakimullah's
there was a huge controversy and there was a huge debate going all over the private channels.
General Saab can explain it that what happened, you know, what happened after that drone strike, you see. So, my question even at that day was that if one drone attack can change the destination of this country, then the enemy of Pakistan, they will put more and more things like that, you see. I mean, we as a nation, we as Pakistanis, we as this group of people who are part of Pakistan, we have to have our own narrative. That narrative should be, and that narrative must be, that we have to save this country, whether it's from one sect or whether from the other sect, whether it's from one school of thought, from the other school of thought. We have to build a consensus in this country. Unfortunately, there has not been consensus in this country for 10-12 years.
Dr. Saab, have we seen a decline in our tolerance levels, in our patience levels in this country over the last few decades?
I see things differently. I think the people of Pakistan are quite patient. They believe in tolerance, and they believe in many other things. As far as the Talibanization is concerned, I just wanted to clarify two things. There are two types of Talibans: military Talibans, militant groups. We have to deal with them in the same language they are talking to us. Second is Taliban ideology. Now, as far as the Taliban ideology is concerned, we have to go through the education, we have to go through the training. This is what the brother is saying, and I fully support it, that this is not possible to, you know, eliminate from the society. But we also have to keep in mind the foreign funding behind that Taliban ideology,
which has been mentioned, that the external forces, whether, you know, we could name them, whether it's Iran, India, anybody else,
whatever is that.
Okay.
So as far as the people of Pakistan are concerned, they are more concerned with their daily life. You know, recently, you know, rising of the, you could say, the electrical problem, the economical problem, and the other terrorism problem. They want their life to be spent peacefully. Okay. And I don't think so there is a sectarian problem. Sectarian problem, as I said earlier, is injected into society to sometimes justify the support to Taliban, or maybe sometimes justify the support to different political parties.
Okay.
And as far as I analyze the political situation of the Pakistan, I think the major role needs to be played by the political leadership. They need to be clear what they want from this country, and what is the meaning of their leadership. I mean, if they want to invite these banned parties into the political process, the political leadership must have a clear agenda, what they want from these groups. But the situation seems to be now opposite. They seems to be getting instructions from these banned organization for their survival. I was going from the train from the Pindi to Lahore, and the train was stopped at Muridke without any stop, because some of the passengers want to, you know, get off and want to join the Muridke. So these kind of things are there, and there are a lot of other things. And another thing is the curriculum. We need to revise that one also. We need to put more human subject in the topic. I don't say secular topic, I said human subject. The promotion of human values, the promotion of human dignity. We can use religious language also, and as far as we can use the language of other religions to accommodate them in the social structure.
But I think in our private schools at least, or even in our government schools, the curriculum is okay. I think when we're talking about changing the curriculum, we're talking about madrasas.
No, even the government level.
You're talking about even the government schools.
Even the governments. You will see in the days of Musharraf, there was a book published and there was a poem in it, Hero, a very famous example. And if you take the first word of every sentence, the name becomes George W. Bush. And this was in our curriculum.
Okay, I wasn't aware. Have you read this poem, Shaukat Sahab, or have you?
And then later on the book was, taken back by the government parties.
Okay, so in general, we are a tolerant society.
Exactly.
We are.
We are.
These things are thrust upon us.
Yeah.
General Sahab, you disagree with this. You're saying the intolerance level
No, well, I would say that by and large people are tolerant and they think that it is a necessity, but at the same time I think intolerance has been developing and at a very fast pace. And I think, Shaukat has described many areas and because of which it has happened. And I would say that we can't just say that everyone is peaceful at the moment. There are several reasons why they are not, and many support the sectarian groups. Why are they supporting the sectarian groups? They may be funded, they may be, their minds may be polluted to an extent that they think they are fighting for a just cause, and then they also look down upon the other groups. Then I also think, well, I mean, I know that many people will not agree with me, but I also think that we have to revisit the whole question of the state and the relationship between the state and religion. I have a feeling that, whereas 97% of our population is Muslim, I don't think there is any threat to Islam in any way in Pakistan. But there is a threat to Islam if everyone tries to promote his version of Islam on the other. So I think we need to seriously consider as to what way we could modify, we could reduce or minimize that influence, because that's a very divisive influence. What happens is that when you introduce religion in the state, it becomes very divisive, as we have seen over these years. But those states, after having experienced for years, like what happened in Europe when the Catholics and the Protestants kept fighting for centuries, and then they realized that the best thing is to make the state, and religion somewhat separated. You could call it secular, you could call it anything. Then, as Bangladesh has done recently. So I think we need to at least discuss this, that even if you don't want to go secular, even if you don't want to separate religion, but how can we make religion a unifying force instead of a divisive force? Is there any other way of doing it apart from becoming secular? I mean, I think these are questions, these are hard questions. These are questions which you will not be able to...
People are very scared to answer, to be very honest.
And they won't even like to discuss. But I think time has come when we should really address these problems, because you will be doing the greatest service to Islam. By making it... there are two things. One is Islam is peaceful. Islam means peace. But at the same time, if its practitioners are pursuing, things which are completely diametrically opposite to what the message of Islam is, then you have to analyze as to why is this happening. We have analyzed some of the factors.
But there's another factor behind this.
Is also this, trying to impose your brand of Islam on the other.
But that's not just happening in Pakistan. Paracha Sahab,
I mean, Taliban are imposing that.
No, but this is not just happening within Pakistan, where
we see this conflict. Let it not happen anywhere else, but we are affected.
All over.
No, it's not happening in Saudi Arabia.
Well, Saudi Arabia is...
No, I mean, it's not happening...
It's happening in proxy places where, there's a Saudi...
No, it's not happening in stable states. It's not happening where the state institutions are strong. It's only happening in countries where the state institutions are non-existent or are extremely weak. And what is a failed state or a dysfunctional state? A dysfunctional state is one where the institutions are more or less so weak or have collapsed. So this is what happens. When the state institutions collapse, that vacuum is filled by forces, sectarian forces, nationalist forces and all these separatist tendencies and those who want to undermine the state. So I think you have to look at it in a very, very thorough manner, and as we all said, in a very comprehensive manner. I also don't have quick answers, but at least one should start seriously thinking and looking at the problem through all these prisms.
I think in a 40-minute talk should be very difficult to look at it.
With your permission,
yes,
may I add something?
Please, absolutely.
There's a very beautiful quote by Wasif Ali Wasif, who is a spiritual Sufi scholar. He said there are 4 legal school of thought in Islam: Hanbali, Malki, Shafi, and yeah. And he said there's a 5th one, and that is to be a Pakistani. And he said, learn to be a good Pakistani first. Once you become a good Pakistani, then learn to be a good Muslim. The problem right now, as he mentioned, we are focused on Islam, we are not focused on Pakistan. So we need to learn to focus on Pakistan, because this is our home, and as a Pakistani we are all equal. As a Muslim,
these are not two contradictory things. The fact is, you have to be a good human being, you have to be a good Muslim, you have to be a good Pakistani. They're all in harmony. They're all converging, and they're not different, going in different directions. So, but the thing is that what is your definition of being a good Muslim? Is it to kill another, from of the other sect, or is it to live in harmony with the other sect? My view is that to be a good Muslim, you have to live in harmony with the other sect, not to kill the other sect or to harm him. So it all depends on how you are looking at it. But if you are being taught day and night, and you are receiving such strong stimuli that the other sect is so terrible that we have to harm them, and we have to kill them, or we have to undermine them.
Sects or minorities for that matter. I would also like to include that.
Yeah, of course. So the same thing is extended elsewhere. Now, if you are not even tolerating Shias, you will obviously not tolerate Ahmadis, you will not tolerate Christians, you will not tolerate Hindus. So you have to bring tolerance for all minorities. So, and
then it will also permeate down to you not tolerating women being emancipated, children's rights, so many animal rights. There's so many things that come in. It's a mindset. We're completely running out of time. Shaukat Sahab, you've been sitting very patiently. I'd like to ask you, this flashpoint that we've seen happen in Pindi, how can it be contained very quickly? If you could just list a couple of things that the government can immediately do right now to contain it, and then to quell it, so that it doesn't spread, which it is now starting to.
I mean, the first of all is the administration, that the Pindi administration should have been alert, before that.
Now what?
This incident. Now, the first priority is restoring peace and calm. The administration should reach out to the groups, head of the groups who were in fact against each other. And third thing, very important, is that this should not become a harbinger for rest of the country, that there is there is definite need of making peace across Pakistan, because today we heard in different cities that there was tension. You see, another thing is that
but you also mentioned that they've immediately put curfew, so they're trying to
restore in fact law and order. But curfew is not a answer for permanent basis, because if today or tomorrow they have to lift the curfew, Pindi is not a small locality. Rawalpindi is a big city. You cannot hold 1 million people hostage at the gunpoint. You see, curfew simply mean that no one will move around, no one will come.
But at least it will give time, Shaukat Sahab, for those people who are influential to be able to talk to each other.
Till curfew is there and movement is restricted, the elected representatives, the administration, they should manage this. What I am saying, that the head of the groups, elders of the
get them together,
and because these people have been traditionally living in the city side by side. Pindi is not the case that there was a sectarian tension in the past. No, they have lived in harmony with each other, and there must be some misunderstanding or by mistake of a mischief that this situation.
You never know if it's again it could be external influences. Who knows?
Sure.
Which hand is behind
the immediate thing is that these elders, they should manage to sit together and sort out the things, because restoring peace is the first priority. Restoring peace is the first responsibility of the government, and for peace in the country, peace in Rawalpindi in this circumstances is very important.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all three of you for taking out the time. 40 minutes is a bit too short to figure out the exact security situation of Pakistan, but as far as this particular incident is concerned and the show, was addressing this is that, as Shaukat Saab said, peace, I would say that political harmony is extremely important. Again, I will quote that example. We have to get the influentials, the political members, the administration, everybody on board. And if these people are all on board together, then maybe we can come up with a solution and make sure that this doesn't happen. But ultimately, however, I truly, as always, hope that Pakistan is headed towards a brighter, prosperous, more beautiful future. Thank you for watching. See you next time.